I'll give you the Ferrari if you can get it to run. Jonathan Blackwell's laughter echoed across the luxury car dealership's courtyard as he pointed to a completely wrecked red Ferrari, lying in the corner of the parking lot like a monument to failure. Walter Johnson, 72 years old, had come there only to pick up his granddaughter, who worked as a receptionist. But when his old Ford pickup broke down right in front of the entrance to Blackwell Luxury Motors, the real estate billionaire didn't miss the opportunity to turn the moment into his own personal entertainment. "Look, everyone," Blackwell shouted to the salespeople and customers who began to gather around. "This gentleman here seems to know a thing or two about cars, doesn't he?" Sarcasm dripped from every word as he watched Walter try to start his 1998 pickup truck. The Ferrari in question was a 2019 model that had been completely destroyed in an accident. Blown engine, bent chassis, fried electrical system. It was literally a pile of red metal that Blackwell kept as a trophy from the time he successfully sued the young heir who had destroyed it in an illegal race. 5 mechanics have already said it's impossible to fix this machine, Blackwell continued, now filming with his cell phone for his social media. "But I'm sure someone with your experience can figure it out, right?" Walter slowly got out of the pickup truck, his calm eyes scanning the wrecked Ferrari. The laughter around him grew louder when they noticed his calloused hands and simple work clothes. What none of them could see was the glimmer of recognition that passed through the old man's eyes as he observed specific details in the wreckage. "Sir," Walter said in a calm voice, "may I take a closer look?" Sure. Blackwell was almost crying with laughter. "You can even get inside if you want. Just be careful not to hurt yourself on the metal." As Walter approached the Ferrari, completely ignoring the laughter and malicious comments, something in his posture changed. His fingers lightly touched the dented hood, and for a brief moment, an almost imperceptible smile crossed his face. What Blackwell and his privileged audience didn't know was that those calloused fingers had built much more than they could ever imagine. And if you're enjoying this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, because what happened next turned that afternoon of humiliation into something none of them would ever forget. The humiliation that Blackwell had planned as a 5-minute show turned into a cruel spectacle that lasted over an hour. Other customers at the dealership stopped to film, sharing it on social media with hashtags like "old man trying to be a mechanic" and "Ferrari impossible." "Everyone, check this out," Blackwell shouted to the growing audience. 30 minutes in and he still believes he can do it. What admirable determination. Laughter echoed across the lot as Walter continued to meticulously examine each component of the wrecked Ferrari. Walter's granddaughter, Rebecca, had left for lunch and had not yet returned. No one there knew that she worked at the front desk, which made the situation even more delightful for Blackwell. He was humiliating a complete stranger without any social consequences. "You know what impresses me the most?" Blackwell continued, now broadcasting live on Instagram to his 200,000 followers. "The confidence. Look at him, completely focused, as if he really knows what he's doing. It's almost touching, don't you think?" Walter had carefully removed the control panel, completely ignoring the comments. His hands moved with a precision that began to bother some of the more attentive observers. These weren't the movements of someone trying to guess. They were the confident gestures of someone who knew exactly where each component should be. "Hey, old man," shouted one of the salesmen, Ryan, encouraged by the laughter. "My dad owns a bike shop. I can get you a job there if this doesn't work out." The joke was met with thunderous approval, but Walter didn't even look up. At 72, he had learned that dignity lay not in the words he spoke, but in the actions he took. And at that moment, his actions were telling. A story that none of them were prepared to hear. What the privileged audience couldn't know was that Walter Johnson had spent 45 years of his life working on something far more complex than luxury cars. While Blackwell accumulated inheritances and manipulated real estate contracts, Walter had devoted 4 decades of his life to a kind of precision that transformed ordinary metal into engineering miracles. 45 minutes. Blackwell announced, consulting his Rolex ostentatiously. "Impressive. People usually give up at 10. Such persistence. It was then that Walter finally spoke without taking his eyes off the engine. "Mr. Blackwell, may I ask you a question?" Blackwell's laughter faltered. "How did this man know his name? Have you ever built anything with your own hands?" Walter continued, now looking directly at him. "Something that existed only in your imagination and had to become real through your work?" The question caught Blackwell off guard. I built a real estate empire," he replied, trying to regain control of the situation. "No," Walter said softly. "That's not building. That's buying." A strange silence fell. There was something in Walter's voice, a quiet authority, that didn't match the image of a helpless victim they had created. 2 hours had passed when Walter asked for a specific screwdriver. "Phillips. Number 2. With an insulated handle," he said calmly. Ryan blinked, confused. I don't know if we have that here." "Drawer 3 of the red bench," Walter replied. "Second shelf? Next to the Torx keys?" More silence. How did he know the exact layout of a workshop he had never visited? Blackwell forced a laugh. "Impressive. You must have worked in many workshops to know standard organization." But his confidence was weakening. Just then, Rebecca returned from lunch. Seeing the crowd gathered and her grandfather in the center of it all, her face paled. "What's going on here?" she asked. An employee," Blackwell said. "Come see, your friend is trying to repair a Ferrari that 5 expert mechanics declared a total loss." Rebecca swallowed hard. She knew exactly who her grandfather was, but she also knew exposing it might cost her job. She chose silence. Meanwhile, Walter accessed the Ferrari's main electrical system. His hands moved with surgical precision. "Do you know what the problem is?" Walter asked, looking at Blackwell. "This engine wasn't destroyed in an accident. It was sabotaged." A wave of murmurs spread across the courtyard. "Sabotaged?" Blackwell laughed, but the sound was empty. "Ridiculous." Walter calmly pointed. "This wire was cut intentionally, then burned to look like overheating. Here twist marks from a forced manual brake." Even untrained eyes could see he was right. "This is absurd!" Blackwell shouted, but uncertainty had already taken root in him. Walter continued. "Every engine has a unique signature of wear and tear. When you work with high-performance engines long enough, you can read them like fingerprints." Rebecca's heart raced. Her grandfather wasn't just an experienced mechanic, he had been chief engineer for Ferrari's racing division for 45 years. And more importantly, he had personally designed this engine. "Sir," Walter said, "may I ask about the insurance you received for this Ferrari?" Blackwell turned pale. How could this old man know about the insurance? Walter removed a metal plate. "Serial number F209WJ447, Vojay. Walter Johnson. I designed this engine in March 2019. The crowd gasped. Blackwell stood frozen. Walter continued dismantling the sabotage. "You destroyed the exact 3 components that produce the highest insurance payout. And you did it using a technique that forces the injection system above tolerance for 4 minutes and 17 seconds. Blackwell's voice cracked. You can't prove this." Walter calmly lifted his phone. "I already sent photos and my analysis to Lorenzo Benedetti, Director of Engineering at Ferrari Maranello." The phone rang. Walter answered on speaker. "Walter, Dio mio." Lorenzo's Italian accent boomed. "That engine was sold to American customer Blackwell." "What is it doing in an accident?" "And it has safety devices you designed to prevent these failures." Blackwell lunged toward the phone, panicking, but Walter stepped back. Rebecca finally stepped forward. "Grandpa, do you need help?" Blackwell stared between them. Your granddaughter works here?" "For 2 years," Rebecca replied sharply. "And I've heard every joke you make about people like him." Finally, Walter revealed his trump card. "You admitted receiving $2.3 million for this irreparable Ferrari. I recorded the entire conversation, including your admission." Blackwell collapsed inside. His empire had cracked. A customer raised a phone. "Mr. Walter, can I post this online? The world needs to see this." Walter nodded. But post this too. He turned back to the engine, connected the final components, and the Ferrari roared to life, smooth and perfect. Like a lion awakened, people screamed, shouted, recorded. Justice echoed louder than the engine. 3 weeks later, Walter sat in an FBI office as agents mapped out Blackwell's massive insurance fraud ring. 17 luxury vehicles sabotaged. Millions stolen. Blackwell was arrested. Fraud, bribery, obstruction. He lost everything. Rebecca was promoted to general manager. The dealership was bought by new owners who valued integrity. The Ferrari Walter restored became a permanent display under the new name. Johnson Premium Motors. Walter became a global symbol of dignity. Ferrari flew him to Italy for a public honor. A scholarship was created in his name for disadvantaged young engineers. His garage became a mentoring haven. Lives changed. Walter became a global symbol of dignity. Ferrari flew him to Italy for a public honor. A scholarship was created in his name for disadvantaged young engineers. His garage became a mentoring haven. Lives changed. Marcus, his most dedicated student, earned a scholarship to Caltech. Meanwhile, Jonathan Blackwell sat in prison, writing a letter admitting his moral bankruptcy. Walter replied with dignity, not easy forgiveness, but the truth. The first step in rebuilding a life is acknowledging the damage. The second is repairing it with actions, not words. At 73, Walter wakes with renewed purpose. His story traveled the world, proving that dignity outlives arrogance, integrity outshines wealth, and true power belongs to those who build, not those who belittle, Rebecca once asked him. Grandpa, did you know this would happen when you accepted his challenge? Walter smiled. When you live with integrity, you never need to plan revenge. Life takes care of putting each person in their rightful place. Walter Johnson showed the world that the best revenge is building something extraordinary, so extraordinary that the opinions of those who tried to belittle you become irrelevant. Justice, dignity, integrity, these engines never fail. Walter Johnson didn't expect peace to come so quietly. Yet every morning at 73, he woke with a strange and steady sense of direction, as though life had waited decades to reveal the road he was truly meant to walk. The world saw him as a symbol now, dignity, resilience, integrity, but Walter never let titles or headlines distract him. He still started his day the same way he had for 50 years, by opening the garage door and listening to tools settle in the cool morning air, but the garage wasn't the same place anymore. Not since the world discovered it. Students came from everywhere: Detroit, Nairobi, Manila, Sao Paulo, some with scholarships, some with nothing but a dream and the determination shining in their eyes. And Walter welcomed all of them the same way, with a nod, a cup of coffee strong enough to wake the dead, and the words he told every newcomer: here we build more than engines. We build futures. Marcus was the first to arrive that morning, shoulders squared with the confidence he had grown into, though Walter remembered clearly the shy kid who once hovered near the doorway, unsure if he belonged. Now Marcus walked in like he'd been born among gears and grease. A Caltech acceptance letter pinned to his backpack proved just how much could grow from someone who simply needed to be believed in. Morning. Mr. Johnson, Marcus said, rolling up his sleeves. Morning, son. Ready for another day? Walter asked. Marcus grinned. Always. Walter nodded. Quiet pride warmed him. He had seen brilliance before in factories, in racing pits, in the eyes of engineers who spoke in numbers the way poets speak in rhythm, but Marcus carried something different: hunger, humility, a fire no amount of wealth could buy. The garage filled slowly with other students, some not yet skilled enough to trust with a socket wrench, others already dreaming up engine designs that made Walter laugh in disbelief. He loved it, every second of it, because he wasn't just fixing cars anymore. He was fixing cycles, fixing futures, fixing pieces of the world. But as the morning carried on, as laughter and metal clinks echoed through the space, Walter felt a familiar weight settle in his pocket. The letter Jonathan Blackwell had written him weeks earlier, creased, worn, and stained at the edges. He had read it more than once, not because he needed to, but because it reminded him of the thin line between what life gives and what life takes away. Jonathan's words were heavy, filled with the kind of remorse a man only finds after everything he built collapses around him. Money gone. Influence gone. The world he once controlled now reduced to a prison cell and his own conscience. Walter had replied with truth, not vengeance. Action, not bitterness. But today for reasons he couldn't explain. Walter felt Jonathan's presence in his thoughts more strongly than before, perhaps because somewhere deep inside him, he knew the story between them wasn't finished. Later that afternoon, after the students left and the garage settled into the soft quiet of early evening, a black sedan pulled up to the driveway. Walter wiped his hands on a rag and stepped outside, curious but calm. A woman stepped out. Young, tall, dressed in a dark suit, an air of quiet authority around her. "Mr. Johnson?" she asked. "That's me," Walter said. "I'm Agent Daniels." "Federal Corrections Liaison?" She held out a sealed envelope. "I was asked to deliver this personally." Walter paused before taking it. He could feel the weight of it, not physical, but emotional, familiar. "From Jonathan?" he asked. The agent nodded once. He said, "It's the last one." Walter didn't open it right away. Instead, he sat on the porch steps and waited for the agent to drive away before he placed the envelope on his lap. His fingers brushed over the paper. He could almost feel Jonathan's guilt pressed into the creases. He sighed, then finally opened it. The letter inside was shorter than any Jonathan had sent before. "Walter, time's almost up for me. I won't pretend I made peace with everything. I didn't. Some things a man must carry until his last breath. But I need you to know this. You were right. Dignity isn't in wealth. Integrity isn't in status. Power isn't in dominance. You lived your life correctly, and I wasted too much of mine. But because of you, I'm trying every day, even in here, to repair what I broke. I hope you keep building the world you always believed in. If there's a next life, I pray I get to meet you before I ruin mine." Jonathan Walter folded the letter slowly, his chest tightening in a way he hadn't expected. There was no triumph, no satisfaction in hearing a proud man brought low. Just sadness, sadness for the path Jonathan chose. Sadness for the life he could have lived. Sadness for the friendship they never truly had the chance to rebuild. Walter stared at the horizon, the sky burning orange and gold, and whispered into the wind, "I hope you find your peace, Jonathan. Wherever you end up." For the next few days, life returned to its rhythm. Walter pushed the students harder. Marcus stayed late every night, trying to master an engine design he could take with him to California. Walter stayed beside him, not to help, but to guide. He realized something as he watched Marcus work. The boy reminded him of Jonathan. When he was young, unpolished, brilliant, hungry for more than the world expected of him. But unlike Jonathan, Marcus was rooted, grounded, humble, and maybe, Walter realized, that was the true legacy, turning broken histories into better futures. A week later, as Walter prepared the garage for another mentoring session, Rebecca ran inside, breathless. "Grandpa," she said, "it's on the news." Walter wiped his hands and followed her to the old TV in the corner. The headline made him freeze. "Jonathan Blackwell dies at 63, final project in prison." Inspired by Walter Johnson, the report continued. Jonathan had spent his last year organizing educational programs in the prison workshop, teaching mechanical basics, rebuilding engines, mentoring young inmates who had no direction. His final request was that every tool and every notebook be donated to Walter's program. Walter closed his eyes, a slow, deep sigh shaking through his chest. "He found his way," he murmured. "After all this time?" Rebecca slipped her small hand into his. "Did you forgive him?" Walter thought about that. Forgiveness wasn't a switch. It wasn't a simple yes or no. "I forgave what I could," he said softly. "And I lived without what I couldn't." Rebecca leaned her head on his arm. "That's enough, Grandpa." Walter looked around the garage, the students arriving. Marcus already preparing tools. The hum of young potential filling the air, and understood something deeply. Jonathan's story was a warning. His own story was a blueprint. and both mattered. As the sun dipped behind the horizon, Walter stepped into the garage, his voice carrying through the space with renewed strength. All right, everyone. Let's get to work. We're building something the world's never seen before. And they did. Over the next months, Walter's program expanded across states. Marcus excelled at Caltech and returned during summers to assist. Rebecca grew into a fierce advocate for educational equity. The scholarship in Walter's name quadrupled in size. Walter became more than a symbol. He became a movement, a reminder that dignity is louder than ego. Integrity is stronger than wealth. And one man, one ordinary man, can change the fate of thousands simply by choosing to live with character. At 74, Walter stood in his garage, older, slower, but more fulfilled than ever, and whispered one final truth to the empty room. The best revenge is building a life so meaningful that the past has no power over you anymore. And with steady hands, he picked up a wrench, ready to begin again. Walter Johnson didn't believe in endings, not really. He had lived long enough to know that life didn't stop at a dramatic moment or a perfect lesson. Life kept moving. It shifted, expanded, spilled over the edges of certainty. And even now, standing in his garage with his wrench in hand, Walter felt less like a man nearing the end of his road and more like someone discovering a new one. He looked around at the walls he'd built with his own hands. Decades earlier, they were filled now photographs, certificates, engine diagrams, notes scribbled by students from around the world. Some frames held pictures of former inmates Jonathan had mentored in prison. Those young men, now free, had joined Walter's program because, as one of them said, if Mr. Blackwell could change in there, then I can change out here. A strange softness filled Walter's heart every time he thought of that. Jonathan may have lived the wrong life, but he hadn't died the wrong man. Late that afternoon, Marcus returned from Caltech for a surprise visit. Taller, stronger, sharper than ever, but his smile still held the earnest spark Walter remembered from the beginning. He walked through the garage like he'd never left. "Mr. Johnson," Marcus said, "I got something for you." Walter raised a brow. "What's that, son?" Marcus handed him a sealed folder. Walter opened it slowly, his eyes scanning the pages, schematics, designs, and one title across the front, "The Walter Engine Prototype 1. Walter blinked. "What is this?" Marcus smiled. "It's everything you taught me, every principle, every lesson, every correction about precision, efficiency, integrity. I put it all into one design. And Caltech approved it. They want to build it with me next semester." Walter stared at the blueprints, the details neat and confident, clearly drawn by someone who understood the language of mechanics at its core. "Why name it after me?" Walter asked. Marcus also grew serious. "Because without you, that engine wouldn't exist. I wouldn't exist, not the version of me who made it this far. You changed my future." A breath escaped Walter, shaky, emotional, proud. "Son," Walter said quietly, "engines are named after legends." Marcus stepped closer. "You are one." Walter looked away for a moment, swallowing the lump in his throat. At his age, pride took a quieter, formless victory, more gratitude. He placed a hand on Marcus's shoulder. "Keep building it. Make it better than anything the world's ever seen." "I will," Marcus promised. "We all will." That evening, the garage was full. Students filled the workbenches. Rebecca interviewed new applicants. Marcus explained engine designs. The room buzzed with purpose, alive, hopeful, forward, moving. Walter didn't have to raise his voice, didn't have to command attention. Influence flowed from him naturally now, not because of authority, but because everyone in that building felt the weight of the life he lived. He stepped outside for air and looked up at the skywide, endless, painted orange by the sunset. The same kind of sunset he had watched with Jonathan all those years ago, when they were young and reckless. Walter whispered, "You finally made something good, Jonathan. Maybe this is how your story was always meant to end." As if the wind carried his words farther, a sudden memory struck him, Jonathan laughing on the hood of the Ferrari. Wild, fearless, so sure the world belonged to him. Walter chuckled softly. "Funny how life works," he murmured. You chased glory and I chased purpose. And in the end, it's purpose that lasts. The door behind him opened gently. Grandpa? Rebecca asked. Are you okay? Walter nodded. Just thinking about Jonathan? About all of it. Rebecca stepped beside him, her gaze following the fading sun. You know, sometimes I think your story shows people something they forget. What's that? That dignity isn't passive. It's strength in disguise. Walter smiled softly. You're a smart one. I had a good teacher, she said. They stood in quiet for a while, the warm breeze carrying distant laughter from inside the garage. Eventually, Rebecca spoke again. Grandpa, people keep asking to film a documentary about you. Should I accept the offer? Walter chuckled. A documentary? About me? Honey, I'm just a man who fixes engines. No, she said firmly. You're a man who fixes lives. He didn't answer that, because deep inside, he knew she was right, but humility was carved so deeply into him that he couldn't claim the title aloud. The next morning, when Walter woke, he felt something shift inside him. Not pain, not fear, just clarity. He got dressed slowly, buttoning his shirt with hands that trembled more than they used to. He walked into the garage, opened the doors, and breathed in the scent of oil and steel his life's comfort. Students filtered in one by one, greeting him warmly. Marcus arrived early again. Rebecca carried files. Someone made coffee too strong? Someone laughed too loudly. Someone dropped a wrench. Life, real, messy. Beautiful life. Walter stood in the center of it all, quietly absorbing everything. Later that night, after the students left, Walter sat at his old wooden desk and pulled out a fresh notebook. He wrote the title at the top, What I Learned About Life, WJND, beneath it. If you build with integrity, time will build the rest. He closed the notebook, placed it on the highest shelf, and turned off the lights. The next day, the world woke to breaking news. Walter Johnson passes peacefully in his sleep at 75 global tributes pour in students. Engineers and leaders honor his legacy. People from across continents gathered at his garage, now a landmark. Protected, funded, and renamed. The Walter Johnson Institute of Engineering and Integrity. Marcus took over the program. Rebecca became its director. Former inmates, former students, former skeptics all returned to honor the man who changed their lives. And on the day of the memorial, a small box arrived. Inside was an old, worn-out leather wallet. Jonathan Blackwell's. A note was tucked inside. He taught me how to live. Let this stay where it belongs. With the man who lived it. Marcus placed the wallet beside the original Ferrari key Walter once kept as a reminder of his past. Not a symbol of wealth, but of transformation. The world remembered Walter Johnson not for the engines he built, but for the people he built, not for revenge, but for greatness. Not for defeating his enemies, but for outgrowing them. And long after the news cycle ended, long after the world moved on, Walter's final lesson lived on quietly, powerfully. Truthfully, the greatest legacy isn't a name on a building. It's the lives that continue running because you tune their engines with love, wisdom, and dignity. And those engines never stopped.